Are my judges ready?
Yes.
Okay. Imagine you have just built a brand new dream home on the river, and tonight is the first night you get to stay in this home. Last night, the United States Geological Survey, also known as USGS, predicted that river levels would reach 24 feet. When you were building your home, you took precautions and made sure to build it at 35 feet, which is well above the flood line. So you're safe, right? Well, like the USGS predictions, you were wrong. Before you know it, the river levels are rising fast, and before you know it, your brand new home is washing down the river with all of your personal belongings and sentimental items. Good evening. My name is Grace Minge, and while many people believe that disaster recovery is the government's responsibility, I believe is that non-governmental organizations and volunteers in the community are necessary for victims of disaster to manage coping with grief and loss. The previous scenario actually happened to Tim and Sandy Johnson on April 29, 2017, during the flood that affected many communities in southern Missouri. They became only two of many victims. My project altogether is over loss due to disasters. I chose this topic because I know many people in this community and in surrounding areas have been heavily affected by many different types of disasters, such as the flood that destroyed the Johnsons' home. Previously, I gave a scenario of what can result from flooding, but there are actually many different types of disasters that one may experience in his or her lifetime. Natural disasters are out of one's control and usually cause a massive amount of damage over a widespread area. Locally, we may experience flooding, tornadoes, earthquakes, and possibly droughts. Two major events that occurred recently in multiple coastal states were Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Irma. Many people are still recovering from these events. And hurricanes are the most powerful type of natural disaster, and flooding is the most common type. They may also experience a human-instigated or accidental type of disaster. An example of a human-instigated disaster would be terrorism. In areas where large groups of people are expected to gather, there is a higher risk for violence to occur. They may also experience an accidental type of disaster, which would be chemical spills, explosions, and fires. Although these are accidental, they still cause a massive amount of damage. Workplace and home fires usually cause a serious amount of structural damage, loss of personal belongings, and even loss of life. While there is a wide variety of disasters, they all have a major impact on life when homes are destroyed and personal belongings are lost forever. Tim and Sandy Johnson's dream home was completely destroyed during the flood of 2017, and they had piles of boxes of personal belongings just sitting in their home waiting to be unpacked. When the floodwaters finally receded and they were able to go back through the damage, they were only able to find two of these items. Mr. Johnson was particularly upset because he lost his wallet that contained a $2 bill that had been passed down in their family for generations. They not only lost their brand new home, they lost many items that meant a lot to them. Another major effect that disasters have on life is when loved ones are lost. Most deaths result either from others trying to save other people during the disaster or simply from the destruction of the disaster itself. In 2005, during Hurricane Irma, an estimated 2,000 deaths resulted. After a disaster occurs, the victims will usually start to experience stages of grief. Most people experience these stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, panic, guilt, and worry. These specific emotions are often associated with the victim's resistance to accept the pain of the loss. Coping with grief is unique for every individual, and they will usually experience, or there are many different influences that one may have to cope with grief. These influences include, but are not limited to, the relationship with anyone who has died, how that person had died, how others are coping with, how they have coped with past tragic events, and how others are coping with the same situation. A suggested way of coping with grief is actually to reevaluate the situation and talk about it with others or a professional. There are three important factors to the disaster recovery process: the government, non-governmental organizations, and volunteers. It would be really hard for a community to recover without the assistance of the government. Novelist Layla Lamy stated that all of us depend on a range of local, state, and federal agencies to prepare for an emergency, show leadership as it unfolds, and provide relief in its aftermath. She criticizes President Trump for his proposed budget cuts to our government's funded disaster relief programs. In 2018, he wants to cut $667 million in FEMA funds. FEMA is an organization that helps cities be better prepared for future disasters, and they also lead in disaster relief. They have access to many tools, such as the urban search and rescue teams that search specific areas for any victims that are in need of immediate care. While these government-funded organizations are very important, non-governmental organizations, are also known as NGOs, are very crucial to disaster recovery. NGOs are community and faith-based organizations that provide social and health services. One major NGO is the International Red Cross that aids in anything from a small house fire to a hurricane that can affect multiple states. These NGOs help to create a connection between individuals and the organizations in their community. With this connection, they have the ability to recover better in future situations. During Hurricane Irma, these faith-based organizations were actually the most hands-on during the disaster relief process because they provided comfort and they also helped save lives. Along with these NGOs, volunteers make up a large portion of the disaster recovery process. The actions of these selfless volunteers helps to create a therapeutic community. They donate their time, money, and any other resources in order to meet the needs of those who are struggling. When an individual is donating their time, they're making a commitment to helping others. One person who donated their time during Hurricane Irma was Mrs. Crystal Meadows of Katy, Texas. She discovered that firefighters down the street had been wearing the same clothes for multiple days. She decided to offer her assistance to them by taking their clothes to her home and washing them for them. Then Mr. and Mrs. Meadows organized a community barbecue for the first responders and locals who were in need of a meal. The Meadows and their neighbors made around 15,000 meals in 5 days. Volunteers like them are the heart and soul of disaster recovery. For my project, I wanted to create something that would help local victims of disaster. These victims are already suffering from loss and trying to cope with grief, so they shouldn't have to worry about how they're going to purchase small items such as personal hygiene products. Personal hygiene is a daily routine, and an important phase in the disaster recovery process is to actually restore the daily routines of these victims' lives. I created 24 personal hygiene kits to donate to the local Willow Springs Fire Department for distribution to victims of disaster. I placed all of my personal hygiene items into a Ziploc bag and then placed them into a drawstring bag with a bottle of water and a water bottle. For the technology portion of my product, I used a program that was new to me called Pictographer to create a poster to place inside the bags. This poster included a list of local resources such as Minge, the Salvation Army, and multiple churches. At the bottom of my poster, I also included a positive message that read, "In hopes that the items in this bag help brighten your day, may the struggle that you might face be a little less. Most importantly, know that you matter and that we care. Today, tomorrow, and every day, may you be blessed." Most of the items were donated to me by Willow Springs Dental, Cox Health in Willow, and OMC in West Plains. I did, however, have to purchase the wash rags, the bottles of water, and the drawstring bags, but I'm very grateful for the generosity of our local businesses because without their help, I wouldn't have saved the amount of money that I did. My original intentions were to spend around $100, but with all of their donations, I only spent around $50. My project went fairly smoothly for me. I did, however, have a few issues with my printer when trying to make my posters. We ended up buying a completely new printer and when we got it all set up, we realized that it was black and white only. Therefore, my posters could not be in color like I had originally hoped for. Another problem I encountered was with my nervousness when asking these businesses for donations. I had to step out of my comfort zone in order to make my project successful. But I am very grateful because these businesses were so kind and helpful for my project, and it really all paid off in the end. If my product had been created in April 2017, Tim and Sandy Johnson could have greatly benefited from it. Mrs. Johnson related that they are still recovering, but with the assistance of the local fire departments and the comfort of their neighbors, they felt it was easier to manage coping and start the recovery process. Their neighbors were out helping others even when they had their own damages to tend to. Volunteers like their neighbors and non-governmental organizations are crucial to a successful disaster recovery. After researching the experience and recovery from loss due to disasters, I decided to create my product of personal hygiene kits to donate to local victims of disaster. My project altogether has really helped me grow as a person and has also encouraged me to get more involved in local volunteer organizations. Next time any type of disaster occurs in your community, I want to encourage you to step up and donate your time, your money, or even small items such as personal hygiene products to the victims. It may not seem like much to you, but it could really make a huge difference in their disaster recovery process. Thank you. Do my judges have any questions? Yes.
Do you have any idea how much of a demand there is for these kits that you made? Like you made 24. Did the fire department give you any idea that, oh, this will probably last us for a couple of years, or?
I actually when I messaged the fire chief, I asked him how many he thought I should make. And he gave me the number 10 to 15. And I didn't feel like that was enough, so I went for 2 dozen. But when I asked him like what kind of items I should donate, he said personal hygiene items were very beneficial.
Okay, great.
Any other questions?
So could you just give me a list? I mean, I could have gone in here and looked, but when you say personal hygiene, just like, can you give me a list of what's in there?
Yeah, I had toothbrushes, toothpaste, 2 razors, deodorant, shaving cream, a bar of soap, deodorant, and wash rag. Those were what I originally wanted, but I was also donated chapstick. I was donated notepads and pens. So it's not personal hygiene, but they could use it. And the water bottles were donated to me as well.
Great.
Anything else?